Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Next hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we've decided that we're going to spend more time talking about media and virtual production. So two hours of Q&A. So if you're watching, this is a great time to get your questions in early and let us know what you want to talk about here. We had a big show yesterday, so we're kind of in a little bit of a recovery mode, but we had a great time. And so if you've got any questions, this is a good day to ask general questions in the slow time of the end of the year. All right, let's go ahead and jump into them. Mitch, what do we have?
First one in from Mark Steele in Orlando, Florida. And Mark asked, I have the opportunity to pick up either a PR40 or an EV RE20 microphone for $250. Both are in like-new condition. Which would the panel recommend? Would you be used primarily for Zoom? By the way, great show yesterday. Really enjoyed it.
That's great. Mitchell?
I hate to be smart about this, but I'd buy both of them at that price. That's an excellent price. But between the two... I've used the RE20 for years on the radio, and the difference between that and the PR40 is the RE20 has a great off access, but it's not a good mic to get up close and talk and use the proximity effect on. A PR40 will definitely do that for you. So if you want to have one of those sexy radio voices, the PR40.
Good, Bill.
This is kind of a flip a coin thing. They both sound fabulous for what they are. They both do the same job kind of in the same way. There are some subtle differences. And like everything, you try to match a voice and a mic together. So it depends on which one reacts best to your voice. But I think of the two, you take away all the rest of that stuff, the EV RE20 has been around a lot longer than Bob Heil's mic. Now, he is a fabulous designer and his mics are great. But I just think the RE20 might have a little bit better resale value, but it's just such a coin flip. Hard call.
Go, John.
Two great mics. However, you need an interface that has enough power on the preamps in order to power both those microphones. So be careful with interface.
I don't think the PR40. Oh, you need enough gain on the PR40.
Yeah, that's right.
PR40 is dynamic, so you don't need to power it, but you do need to gain it up. Yeah, go ahead, Javier.
I will go to the RE20 as well, but following with the idea that Mitch had, I would buy both if you can and try them, because with every voice is different with every microphone. I think the RE20 is a bit smoother and with most voices, especially talked voices can work better. But if you try with your voice and then resell the other one. Yeah,
I find the RE20 to be more forgiving. You can move it back and forth a little bit more, so it doesn't have quite the same heavy-handed off-axis rejection that the PR40 has. So, if you have a noisier environment, a lot of times you may want to think about a PR40 because I think it's going to pick up a little less. It does. The RE20 has off-axis, but not at the same level, and it doesn't fall off as fast. And so you can move around a little bit more around it than what you can do with a PR40, in my opinion. So it really depends on as was said earlier, depends on what your voice likes or what likes your voice, as well as how noisy your environment is. If I had a more noisier environment, I'd probably lean towards a PR40. If I have a quiet environment, probably the RE20. Next question.
From Tom Ferguson in Phoenix, Arizona, and right here on our panel, there he is. So, how many points purchase devices did each of the panelists rack up on the 12 months of office hours by the remotes?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I might as well fess up. I do not have the newer lighting, the vMix license, or the Decklink Duos. Well, yet. So 8 points.
Go ahead, Javier.
I only got 2 points, but because I already had some stuff like the mic recorder, I already had a mic. But the Mac Mini is very weird because when my wife heard the song, she was like, "Oh, that's why you want to buy a Mac Mini, and you also want to buy this other thing, and it's like a shopping list." Like, yes, it is.
Go ahead, John.
I'm right there with Tom. I think I'm about the same.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I only had 2 things on the entire list, and one of them I don't use. I don't use my Stream Deck daily. So all I had was the Blackmagic 6K. And so I'm just failing miserably in terms of keeping up here.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Just 4.
I think I have most of them except for I don't have the vMix license. I think I have everything else, I think. Not the newer lighting. I have different lighting than newer, but I have lights, I think. Next question.
Question coming in for me. Would it be possible, just please, if we could play the remote's 12 Days of Christmas again, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about how it got made?
Not let's not do it today, but let's do a second hour on how it got made. Like let's just save it for that. But it was a lot of fun. You can go back and watch it from yesterday. But let's go ahead and work. We'll work on a second hour where we talk about what happened there. It was incredible work. I didn't even see it coming. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. So just two things that must be said. First, Dale Nebeda kind of ramrodded that whole project and did a magnificent job of it. The other thing is Brian Anderson put that video together, and Brian just consistently amazes me as part of the band, how multi-talented he is.
So much fun.
In this case, video editing as well as all the rest of the musical stuff he does. Amazing.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to see if we can't get them on, and we'll schedule a time for them to talk about a second hour, maybe next week. Next question, Mitch, real quick.
I was just going to say, with the holidays, maybe we can play it and then play it again and then play it again. You know how the holiday songs are. Okay.
I'm not that way with holiday songs.
Okie dokie.
So anyway, but I think it was great, and I think I would love to break it down. Yeah. Next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, USA, with a question. The new Zoom Rooms 5.13 released into the wild. Can we allow folks to test functionality in the after-hours Zoom ISO test sources room?
I'm fine with that. I don't know what we want to test there, but absolutely. I mean, that's what we should be using that for. So, yeah, definitely. And we'll probably talk. We might even have a meeting about it, but we should talk about like one of our second hours or something about what we want to do next for that, because I'm ready to kind of record a new version of those, and so we want to think about what those should look like. Next question.
Andy Shaw in London, UK. Hi, and congrats on 1K. We've installed 4 Behringer XR32Rs, 3 of which have had to be returned for repair without power supply issues. Is it all Behringer or just X32R? Anyone else had similar problems? Recommendations for similar that's more reliable? Thanks.
Power supplies are the problem with the X32, and so it's a Behringer problem. We had one Behringer that took an X32 that took a long time to fix. That's the other problem with it right now, is that if it goes bad, there's some kind of supply chain issue. So, but that is the one weak point of the X32s, and it seems to be, it either works or it works or doesn't work pretty quickly out of the box. But getting it fixed takes a while. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think in modern manufacturing, I've seen this kind of thing happen over and over again, which is the component supplier who makes the power supply. And it's, who knows what company that is. They order a batch, that batch may be good, but then they reorder, and for some reason there's a little anomaly. I've seen things where they go in waves and there's a problem with a component for a short period of time. Then they fix the supply chain and it's no longer a problem. So it's just modern manufacture. It's tough to do those, to make sure everything is exactly right always, unless you're really got a great level of quality control.
Next question.
TJ Asher, Minneapolis, Minnesota, asking, how much would everything listed in the 12-month song actually cost? Is this a new office hours monetary unit?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, according to the panel chat, it would be $6,631. However, I take issue with that. On the 12th day, the Apple keynote, I think it depends.
There we go. Yeah, exactly. There's a wash there. Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, there are times when the panel gets stumped by a question. It happens to me sometimes with my questions. Is there any way the panel could have a lifeline where they could call out to an expert to get the answer, or have a dedicated researcher?
Yo, Jesse.
Similar to this topic, is there a location on the Discord where unanswered questions go to find a second life?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually, Jesse. With the Chat GPT 3 API coming, we should have an avatar for GPT if nobody answers, and then
let's ask Chat GPT. And you're like, go ahead, Bill.
Well, in the TV show, the lifeline was something that it looked like it happened. Let's just call somebody and they'll be there. In real life, they had to arrange that call, set it up, edit it into the flow of the show and the rest of that. We are honestly, truly real time. I mean, there is no delay about this at all. And so it would be very difficult to have a group where a circumstance where we had a direct link to the expert to answer it every day, available for every show. Although that would be fabulous if we could.
Harshid?
I think we have a really good lifeline. That's Mickey and the rest of the people that hang out in the event chat that usually answer stuff for us. So I think if we utilize the event chat with other people that might know an answer to, just to push the information across, that could be helpful.
Well, and a lot of times we are looking at that event chat, so it's definitely worth putting what you think your 2 cents are if you're watching the show and you're looking at event chat. I think that this is probably more of a Sunday question for the question manager. so anyway, we'll talk about it on Sunday if you want to talk about more. Next question.
Coming to Bob Sturdivant from San Antonio, Texas. He asked me to do an accent there. Good morning. Have an ATEM Mini Pro ISO. Would not pass HDMI to Epson projector. Sorry, no model number. Did normal troubleshooting. Saw on site there are problems doing this. Anyone found a workaround?
I would try, if you can, if you can afford to do it, I would get a decimator. So get a decimator, MDHX. And have HDMI in and out, and you may find that it just cleans it up. And we don't know exactly, that's the way to solve it. I can't tell you why it's happening. so I don't know exactly. It may be that the frame rate is not something that the frame rate that you're putting out may not be something the Epson can see. So that's a high probability of the Epson's got some kind of frame rate issue that's there. Another thing that you could potentially do is hook up a computer with an EDID emulator and then let it see the pass-through and lock it. And then so that you see a signal in the Epson, something was connected to it, and you lock that EDID, then you plug the Mini in and then into that little emulator. And the Mini should negotiate that correctly and give the Epson. So that's the least expensive way to do it. But it's always good if you're doing video production to have at least one decimator in around in a bag, because it always tells you like, oh, well, we'll just see how this goes. Because the decimator will see almost anything and it'll put out almost anything. And so it gives you kind of a little toolkit to kind of work through. Next question.
From Wayne Ma in Park City, Utah. I listened to your presentation on HDR a few days ago, but I didn't see anything on HDR10 Plus. What is HDR10 Plus?
HDR10 Plus is a format, I believe, that was created by Samsung, and it mostly is because they don't want to pay for Dolby. The HDR10 Plus is I don't want to pay for Dolby Vision. So that's just being cheap. so anyway, it has most of the traits. So the difference between HDR10, the difference between HLG and HDR10, there's a lot of differences, but one of the big differences is no metadata. It makes it easier to work with. HDR10 has metadata, and that has the max fall, max CLL, and red, green, blue trims, but only for the entire piece. So the entire thing that goes out will have a thing saying everything you're about to see has this range, right? And then the Dolby Vision does that range, that max fall, max CLL, and the trims at every frame. Really, what you're looking for is every scene, so it can make adjustments to it. That was the advantage over HDR10, which does make a big difference. HDR10 Plus gives that to HDR10. Basically, you can now have this open format that has the ability to trim. But the problem with that is that it's free and no one's managing it. And when it's free and no one's managing it, there's not the same level of support across all the apps and hardware and everything else. And Dolby spends a lot of money and time, making sure that Dolby Vision is getting adopted. And so you don't have anyone running with it. It might work because it's free, but the problem is that I think it's probably too far behind in the marketing where, everybody knows that what you buy, when you buy a TV now, almost everybody knows that you buy it. You make sure that it says Dolby Vision on it because you want to make sure that you're going to get that. No one's looking for HDR10 and no one even understands what it is. So there's an ecosystem problem that HDR10 has, but it's very similar to Dolby Vision, but it also means that it probably won't progress as fast as Dolby Vision if they make any updates. You have things like Dolby Vision IQ, which is paying attention to the ambient lighting within the room that this TV is sitting in, and then making adjustments to how things work out. And so those kinds of handoffs and those kinds of interactions are not going to be available in HDR10 other than Samsung TVs, I think. So I think that Samsung just is chafed by the whole having to pay a licensing fee. That's what HDR10 is about. Next question.
From Bob Sturdivant, back again from deep in the heart of San Antonio, Texas, asking, if you were to use Chat GPT to write a children's book, can you publish it? How do copyright rules and laws work with any of that?
Go ahead, John.
It's a challenge because Chat GPT is basically pulling information from a giant sample of data, and so it could be a copyright violation. This is ongoing work. If you watch any of Sam Altman's videos on YouTube, or Demis, the guy that's CEO of DeepMind, they'll tell you that they're purposely rolling these things out slow because they didn't want to scare people in mass, the neo-Luddites, as I call them. And so they're slowly rolling these features out, and then society will have to challenge these questions moving forward.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
And don't hold your breath. I mean, I'm just constantly astonished by how innovation and regulation are dancing, and regulation continues to fall farther and farther and farther behind innovation. This is going to be a tough one. You know, you get these things and it doesn't follow the old forms of intellectual property regulation. It's happening too fast, and it's happening via computer too much. And so the regulatory system, which has its place, I mean, it's there to stop abuse, but it's also, I think a lot of people feel, and I'm one of them, that it's there to protect the larger entities and give them legal tools to keep people from stealing too much of the money or grabbing too much, diverting too much. That's always going to be in tension. You know, everybody should be able to use everything, but everybody should have the rights to their own work. And there's always going to be this dance. And boy, it's a mess right now. And I don't think it's going to get less messy as we move forward into this AI world.
Good, Javier.
And actually, last week, a story surfaced of a guy that actually made a children's book with using ChatGPT and Midjourney for the illustrations. So as always, the first ones may get ahead or can be the first ones to get their heads chopped off by the law. So he could be a millionaire by now, but he could get in jail in 6 months. So we'll see.
Well, it probably won't get in jail, but it might get fined, or might just lose not get the copyright. But you know what they say? They say that if you're one step ahead, you're a leader, and if you're 2 steps ahead, you're a martyr. Go ahead, Mitchell.
You would probably receive immediate response from the legal AI.
It's really interesting. There's a lot of forums that I'm on that people are talking about this. I think the tricky thing is that it's not keeping those images. It's not like I think people who own the copyrights keep on telling themselves that somehow it's copying, pasting parts of their video, parts of their stills or images or words into it. It's not really doing that. It's building a model in which it's examining those, and it's learning. To say that people can't download you can't download images or text from the internet, that's impossible, because that's what everybody does. When you're looking at something, it doesn't just sit in your browser. It was downloaded to your computer to show it in your browser. So you can't say that something can't download it. And basically what it's doing is building models from those images. And so it doesn't need the images when it's done. So if you said, okay, you can't use the images anymore, okay, well, fine. It already built those images, so I think that it's going to be, I think that we're going to keep on going back and forth. I think that most likely you're not going to be able to stop AI from drawing pictures. Now, whether it has, the big question then is whether you can copyright what you're doing. Now, what we may end up seeing is an explosion of non-copyrighted works. Like the people just start putting out stuff that they can sell. Like I could sell a bunch of photos or a bunch of images of, Chewbacca as a robot in the style of Rembrandt. I can now make this. I can make this little plaque, and I can sell it for $8. And someone else, if they want to sell it, they can. But it could lead to a massive devaluation of content in its own. Because it's not so much that I think that's what people keep on thinking. If someone's going to take their copyrighted work and sell it, that might be the case. But what's much more disruptive is the fact that anybody can make anything. We sat in after hours yesterday for almost an hour, just sitting there, people calling out things to throw into Midjourney, and that produced an awful lot of fun. And the question is that you can buy a book, but you could also just get GPT to write a book and print it with all the things that you made, and you give it to your kids and there's no buying of anything, and that's the thing that people have to. I think that artists have to worry about more, is people being self-sufficient, and not worrying about copyright and just building the things that they want to build. And I think that we're going to see that gap close, where I can think of something and it can be built, whether it's in 2D or text or 3D or printed, or, I mean, there's going to be a point where I can talk to my AI about what I want. I have this, I want to build this little stand for my ATEM Mini. I'm going to be able to show it my ATEM Mini. Like just take a camera and take a couple photos, show my ATEM Mini to it and talk about the stand that I want. And it keeps on showing me versions of that stand. Okay, well, move this over a little bit, move that over a little bit, and then I say, okay, print that, and it'll print that out. And that's what's coming, is the idea that someone without any creation skills can sit there and just talk about what they want and get it out there, and there's no friction or cost to them. And that's the thing that I think is far more disruptive than what we're talking about right now, because people are thinking in the box of the past. Now, this is what we've done with copyright in the past, and we have to also see whether copyright continues. I don't think that they're going to be able to keep on passing the copyright bill. And then the question is where, that it's part of our whole problem is our entire copyright world has been twisted inside out by a mouse. So, so we protect Mickey Mouse at all costs. And because of that, we've stopped updating copyright. And the copyright was designed, patents were designed so that it would be available for somebody to use for some period of time, and then it would move into the public domain so that everyone could use it. And we've stopped doing that. And I think that there's some point where we have to say this is crazy. And I think there's a reasonable amount of time to give people copyright, but it doesn't have to be forever. Go ahead, John.
I just wrote a child's book on Chat GPT 3, and then I asked it, is this copyrighted material? It says, this is what it says: as an AI, I do not hold the copyright to this material I generate. You are welcome to use the material I've provided, but please keep in mind that's provided for educational and informational purposes only. If you would like to use it for any other purposes, your responsibility to ensure that you have necessary rights and permissions.
There you go. So, and again, I think that what's interesting is that this structure that's coming out is, I think, going to be less about people using AI to sell things and more about people using AI to, because remember, we're going to get into, like, we haven't even started with music yet. I want to hear Nirvana in the style of reggae. I want to hear, give me a good, bouncy beat, and then start saying, well, let's add some violins here and let's do some stuff here. And it just starts putting that stuff together. And again, I don't know if it has to be to something that becomes resale. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Do you pay a premium when you loan your child a CD? There's a copyright there involved.
Yeah, well, you own the CD, but I mean, it's, yeah, sure. I mean, and again, I think that the number one thing is that a lot of us have been, the problem is no one's really gone into the fact that people have been downloading stuff from the internet for a long time. And if you don't go after someone at the beginning, it becomes harder to adjudicate. So next question.
From Todd Perry and Prescott, Arizona, asking, apologies if this has been asked recently, do we have any more info on the Zoom double-ended record rollout timeline?
Soon, but I don't have a date. I think it's going to be. I think it's sometime in 2023. I don't have the exact date, and even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you. sorry, just kidding. I don't know what it is, but I think I'm pretty excited about it. I think that it'll be really cool to see how it works when it works. And I think we'll be probably on the front end of testing it, because what's interesting. I did find it interesting that I think couple different services are now adding the double-ended. So double-ended went from, hey, this would be really cool, to it's going to be table stakes by the end of next year. Is that if you're doing a social, like whatever, everyone's going to have it. So it's good that Zoom's staying ahead of it. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine from Panama asks, what is the best approach to have audio-friendly flykit to collab with other mixers, external audio? My flykit has an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO plus Scarlett 2i2. The Scarlett is the interface to receive audio and send to ATEM.
I would probably split it from the Scarlett. So if the Scarlett has a line out, you can put it into a splitter, just a passive splitter, and run it out from there. But I think that I would go from the Scarlett. I wouldn't probably do an output. And I will admit that I know very little about the audio for the ATEM because I don't use it at all. Like the only thing I use in the ATEM is audio follows video. If I have some computer source and I want to actually combine that in, but I wouldn't try to pass things from one switcher to another. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm just curious, but I do run audio through my ATEM Extreme, but I do it via the HDMI. Is there any degradation there? Because I find that the controls that are available via the Fairchild
Fairlight
EQ, Fairlight, excuse me. I keep saying Fairchild. That's old stuff.
It's a chip
Is it compromised in any way on
if it's coming digital,
processing?
No, it shouldn't be compromised at all. It's just the limitation of your preamp that's in your camera, which isn't very good. And no cameras have good preamps. I'm not dissing Mitchell's preamp. I'm just saying no cameras have good preamps. And so you're limited to that, but the signal will be digital. It'll come in just the way it is. Go ahead, Javier.
The preamp is an add-on to my camera. In other words, the one internal to the camera is El Crapo, but the add-on digital handle is good.
That still fits into the clean show.
Crud.
I'm going to throw you a yellow card there. Go ahead, Javier.
You can also try using the Scarlett as a USB interface. It has 2 channels. If you're collaborating with other people, you can use 2 microphones and get directly the USB audio and the ATEM just for the switching, and just adjust maybe if you have some delay.
Yeah. It's the other thing you could do is if you have 2 computers that you're going to for these ATEMs. You could also use Dante between the 2, but you'd probably want to, just pass them, just send it from one computer to the other. There might be a little bit of a delay there, though. Next question is
Paul Terry Wallace. Unless I'm not allowed to read anymore. Paul Terry Wallace from Austin, Texas. He asked, yesterday I started a Canva team with Mitch Hill and Serge Blondin. How are these teams used in education, and what do you make of Canva Docs and the surprisingly good Magic Writer, which is Canva's answer to Chat GPT?
Mitch, you were part of this. Do you have any opinions?
I didn't know I was part of it. Sorry, I can't answer.
Okay, I don't know. There's just not a lot of Canva users here, but we should. This is exactly what Paul was talking about earlier. We need to have Chat GPT, and then we could ask Chat GPT about Canvas's Magic Writer, and Chat GPT would probably say, I don't know anything about Canvas because it hasn't been in the last 2 years. I don't know. There's not a lot of Canva users here. Next question.
Jack Cannon from Phoenix, Arizona. Favorite mount for double stacking 32-inch monitors?
So I have the ones that I have would probably work that way. I have 24-inch monitors on them right now, and these are the Huanuo, like these Huanuo. And they're about $80 on. I have like 4 of them here, 3 of them here. They're about $80. They're a little stiff. They have a little adjuster, with a Allen wrench that you can loosen them up, and it works. But it takes a little bit to get there. So that's kind of the low cost version that is pretty hefty, and I'm sure that could probably handle a 32-inch monitor. And they're like 2, and they're adjustable. You can just kind of move them around or stick them up and over. So that's what I use. I don't know if you could put a 32-inch on. The Amazon makes better ones. They're about $250, and I don't. They're considerably better than the Huanuos, but they're just more, 3 times more expensive. I've never tried to put a 32 on. My standard way of working is lots of 24s or 27s. So 32 is kind of an uncomfortable size for me just to manage. So anyway, so I think that the Huanuos, and I like to have them I like to be able to move them around, like just grab them. The nicer ones that I think can do 32-inch are the monitors in motion. They have some really nice arms. Like these start to turn into, and then finally the other ones that are really in the expensive but really cool range are the OC White, which also make this. I didn't realize they made. This is my mic arm. My underslung mic arm is OC White. It turns out OC White's a really big company that makes a lot of things. This is just one little thing that they make. I went to their website. I was like, holy smokes. Like this is a massive, massive machining company. But they have some arms for monitors as well. So I would check those out as well. Next question.
Next question from Paul Terry Wallace, again in Austin, Texas. Our own office hours James Haldane from Vancouver has a kit with 2 BirdDog P120s coupled with a Skaarhaj controller using SDI, and he says they run hot. Fry an egg hot. Do all PTCs run hot, and how does this setup rank for price performance? What about the P240?
Yeah, I don't. You know, the not everything runs hot. A lot of that has to do. Heat dissipation turns out to be a pretty complex problem. You know, one of the things that we had in, you know, like because a lot of these chips are producing a lot of heat, and so sometimes when they're hot on the outside, that is by design. If they're a metal exterior, they get hot because they're literally using the casing as a heat sink. You know, and so so a lot of times that's why they are getting hot, is because that's what they designed them to do. And it may seem odd, but a lot of people have found that plastic was hard because they had nowhere to put the heat. And so now if it's metal and it's getting hot, if it's plastic, it gets hot. It's probably just bad design. So I don't know enough about the BirdDogs as far as the price performance. I think that, you know, for folks, for me, there's the Canon 1-inch sensor that's $5,000, and there is the there's the little you know, the little one, the little tiny one, the Link from and then the next one up for that in my world is the Canon. The next one up there is the FR7, and after that a telemetrics. So those are those are the steps that I think about. So this one kind of falls in between those steps, and so I haven't paid much attention to it. Next question.
Talalik Lopez Waterman from Norfolk, Virginia. Do you think they could use Chat GPT for writing fortune cookies?
Javier.
Yes, definitely. As soon as I saw the question, I went to and tried it to what it would spit out. Yeah, and the first one will be like the normal, like the philosophical one, like a new opportunity will soon present itself, seize it with both hands, or trust your intuition and listen to your inner wisdom. But then I switched it up a bit and put funny cookie fortunes, and I got: a stray cat will adopt you as its human servant, or you will discover a hidden talent for competitive eating. So definitely say yes.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Yeah, we need demented fortune cookie. We learned how to make fortune cookies when I was in high school. It was like in some class or something, but teaching teenage boys to make fortune cookies is a horrible idea. And what we would do is we would palm them, and we'd go to when we were at a Chinese restaurant, and we'd drop our fortune cookies in to replace the ones that were there. And the fortune cookies, the fortune cookies would have all kinds of nice things, but the ones we left would be like, "You'll die in a car crash in 30 minutes." Like we would just put it in like it would like really, really to the point, and or they were, we would add those, and you get really fun reactions until people didn't think it was funny anymore. Anyway, so but I think that if you were producing them, I think that's an incredible use for it. The other thing that I will know that I would say is that. That it does really good haiku. Like it just has to do a haiku about anything, and it will create. ChatGPT will create. You can do a whole book of haikus just from ChatGPT. Next question.
Robert Barrow in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. Alex, you mentioned you have you make your own SDI cables, but you also mentioned that you will only use a particular termination for those cables. What are the details on those ends?
Well, it depends on the cable. So I can't give you the exact part number because the cable needs to be adjusted for each cable. Because I think I use a 24 gauge cable, which is really, or 22 or 24. I don't have it right in front of me, but it is the Neutrik rear twist is what you're looking for. Neutrik rear twist, and we'll spend some time in the next couple of weeks. I'll get the stuff in one place, and we'll make some cables, and you'll get to see what that actually looks like. Next question.
John Foldson, Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, wants to know, now that it's available, do I need to put the BirdDog NDI Play on my 12 Days of Christmas list?
I don't know. It's this is is this a playback system? I mean, and I have to admit that we'll have to search for it. We don't. There's not a lot of us that are using a lot of the BirdDog systems. It does look pretty cool. So it is an NDI player. So this is designed to play out. I think that a lot of us would probably end up using some kind of software for it. If we were using NDI, we'd probably use software on a computer to do the play out. But it's pretty interesting that this has something where it can just cast NDI as a player anywhere. And I guess what I would be, it looks pretty interesting as far as having something that you can just kind of throw in there. I think that they're slowly building a pretty good ecosystem. So we're excited about what BirdDog does. It just hasn't fit into a lot of our pipelines. And I think you should look for one Guy's up here. But I think that the BirdDog Play looks really cool. And I think that having kind of self-contained players is a pretty powerful thing. Next question.
Wayne Ma in Park City, Utah asking, so if HDR10, HDR10 Plus, i.e. Samsung, isn't as good as Dolby Vision, then what brand would a consumer buy that isn't OLED?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
There's a lot of new stuff coming out that's replacing OLED that can probably hit that kind of dynamic range. The micro LED, and I think Sony has a thing called crystal LEDs that are pretty amazing what they can do.
I think LG also has both OLED and non-OLED monitors. I will say that if you're willing to care for the OLED monitor, the new ones, the older ones really had a lot of issues with aging, issues with burn-in, et cetera. And I would highly recommend thinking about getting an OLED. The main thing is you just can't watch MSNBC or CNN or anything. You can't leave those things on all day and expect that monitor to survive. So, but you get really sensitive. I will admit, when you have an OLED, you get super sensitive about people putting things on the TV that stay there. It's really like, you're like, why are they doing that to my TV? So, and I think that'll continue to be an issue. Like, I don't really watch TV, so I don't watch regular TV, so I'm not that conscious to it. Go ahead, Mitchell.
You could publish a list of shows you can't watch or channels you can't watch because you started, and I was like thinking, wait a minute, I watch CNN or I watch MSNBC. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. It would be good. It would be good to put that filter into like YouTube TV or whatever. Like, just get rid of all the channels that are going to ruin my TV. The TV, there should be a TV OLED setting on your thing. Yeah. Next question.
Next question in from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. What's the best starter camera for a college student getting into video production?
Go ahead, Javier.
I would go with the good cell phone camera, maybe an iPhone 13, maybe, or 12, especially because you are just starting in video production, and camera choice is just one of the first steps. But you have to learn a lot of things like editing and different stuff, or maybe like planning and producing. And it depends on what are you wanting to learn. So you already have an iPhone or a cell phone that has a good camera, shoot and try different things and know about camera blocking and camera movements and different stuff. And then you take the what camera to use into account. If you're studying photography, it's different. But if you're studying video production, like as a general, I will start with what you already have.
Good, Mitchell.
I think Javier's correct, but I would also go to something like a Sony ZV-E10 or an Z1, because you want to start learning about lenses and white balancing and all the other things that go with shooting with a camera, whether it's a mirrorless camera or even up into the professional cameras that eventually you'll be using.
And go ahead, Jesse.
If you want to get them something with a lot of options, I would go with something in the Sony Alpha series. And if they're really directing towards cinematic production, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras are great starters, but you need so many accessories to get those off the ground.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm going to take a slightly different tack. So if I was back starting over again, the camera doesn't matter that much, but there are some things that I would want to learn about. Manual controls, particularly exposure, focus. I actually think having a zoom lens with a smooth rocker control is a useful learning tool, because you're going to start to learn rates of creep and pull. And without that smooth control, the downside to all these cage-rigged things is you have to put a bunch of Tinker Toy controls on them to be able to get a smooth zoom in and out. And that already exists on even inexpensive camcorders. You want good audio, no AGC or defeatable AGC if it's on there. External audio via XLRs would be preferred so that you can experiment with bringing in both wireless and external audio sources. Get the best tripod you can to start out. And if you get those things, or as many of those things as you can do, so you can learn about the aspects of controllable video, then just go for it. The single thing you want to do is just make video as much as you can. Those would be my priorities if I was starting over.
Go, Jesse.
To piggyback off of what Bill said, a still film camera can teach you a lot about what you need to know for video production. I learned more from my Pentax K1000 than any digital camera I've owned since then.
I had a K1000. That was my first camera too. So it's a great camera. I would say that for the most part, you could just use a phone. Like you could just use a phone. Maybe get the new Apple, the 13, 14, even the 12. These are just incredible cameras. And I think that you should really look at that. If you're going to start spending money, I would go ahead and spend it on something like a Pocket 6K, and I would get the 6K instead of the 4K, so you have shorter depth of field, and you have the regular Canon mount, and then think about, again, you just have to figure out how far you want to go. But I think that the thing about the 6K is, while there is I don't really buy that much gack for it, but you do want to get a cage, get a small rig cage for it that is kind of a nice accessory to keep it safe. A 24 to 70 zoom is kind of nice just to have. That's a good solid all around lens. For that, there's a less expensive one for about $700 or $800 made by somebody, but then there's the L series, but you don't need the L series probably to get started. You do want it to be like a 2.8 so they can get a short depth of field. The nice thing about getting something like the Blackmagic camera is that it's going to shoot in RAW, and you can start learning that your college student can then start to understand the process of bringing RAW in, color correcting it, outputting it, and they don't have to. They can just set it to, I want Apple ProRes with a video LUT, and I'm done. And they can do that. But if they want to really learn and they really want to shoot a higher end piece that's a lot more scalable, if it's recording some kind of RAW format. And I don't think that the smaller Sonys do that. I think that they're in a much more compressed format, so there's a lot less to work with there. The 6Ks are, I have a lot of them, and they're amazing. It's probably the most amazing camera under $2,000 I've ever owned. I've owned a lot of them. So it has so much scale, and there's so much you can do with it. So, and the interface is actually nice. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida asks, have you considered a better archive than YouTube? We use Panopto, and it can word search many thousands of hours within seconds, then deliver links to timestamps within videos.
We should look at it, and if someone's listening, put it in the second hour suggestions. I'd love to have Panopto on. I'm not against it. It's mostly just a matter of time, cost, effort. All those things are things on our end that we'd have to look at. But I'm definitely open to taking a look at what those are as we go into the future. Next question.
Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. For those who use USB webcams, such as the Insta360, how do you integrate USB with the ATEM Mini HDMI for camera switching?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
We were just showing one. In fact, Guy had out the Atomos Zato Connect, which is an amazing device with a monitor built in it. It has a touch screen and the ability to switch between two inputs, and then it has HDMI out. So you could take that as your intermediate device between your 360 and your ATEM.
Yeah, the big disadvantage of doing anything in between is that you're not going to have the controls that you have with what really makes the link sing and makes it so stand out is actually being able to control it with the software. And so if you can't control it with the software, I'm not sure. It's still a good chip, but it's not. It's a little bit of a bummer. So I think that there's not a lot of good ways. I think what we're hoping we're going to see is that we're hoping at some point that we see another version, one step up from there that has an HDMI out. And that lets us control it through the USB-C and still has HDMI out. But we'll see how that goes. Next question.
Ashiativ from New York City. What kind of TV would the office hours crowd buy for use in a bright living room, OLED or QNED? Any specific recommended models?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I have no problem with my OLED in my living room, and I do have a window right next to it. But the Sony 90J, which I'm using, has this X1 processor, which adjusts the lighting behind each part of the screen depending upon what the image is. Apparently it has a database that knows that this is a mailbox in front of a background, and it applies a certain lighting to it. But to be honest with you, things are moving on in terms of technology, and those micro LEDs are to be good ones to deal with. I'm not sure if the QNED is in that category.
Yeah, the ones that we've used in the past have been mostly in the CX, the LG CX range, for a lot of these, and it's a little bit more expensive. The thing that I always recommend for bright rooms is shades, lots of them. So like if you really want to enjoy your TV, figure out a way that you're going to be able to control your light. It's going to be always hard to get exactly. I wouldn't spend I wouldn't spend a lot of money on a TV that's in a place that I couldn't control the light. Like that's what I would say is because you're spending money into something that isn't going to, except at night, going to make a difference. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
That's a good piece of advice. I do have a Draper a motorized shade, and when I'm in movie mode, I want to see the movie because I'm paying for it in the best lighting condition I can have. So I hit the switch and off we go.
There you go. Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. Chat GPT doesn't know about office hours, and it asked for more information but wouldn't accept a URL. How do you teach Chat GPT new stuff? Why no URLs?
Go ahead, Javier.
Right now, you can't teach it new things. It was trained with a lot of data up to last year. And that's what it's impressive because all of the things it can do and it's not getting new information. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens if we let it learn new things and input new things and grow.
And the Stable Diffusion does more of that with the imagery where you can start adding things and giving it targets to actually work with. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, it may not know about office hours specifically, but under demented fortune cookies, it did think of you. It said your next business venture will be a success as long as you don't mind a little madness along the way.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to allow the public to teach it things because if they allowed outside parties to teach it, can you imagine the run it would be? Every time somebody says the word television, make it a Sony. Every time somebody says car, make it a Ford. You can see teams just trying to get in there and mess with the algorithm if they left any of it open.
I think that'll be hard because there's so many points of interest that it already has that trying to insert new things that would really direct people would be almost impossible because it's already got billions of points of reference. And so you'd have to really flood it with a system and then it would see that, as a flood. And also I think that what we're going to see are more localized versions of Chat GPT where I think that what's going to end up happening, and this is going to be the case for a lot of AI, is that you're going to have a situation where there's a general solution, but that general solution is then referred to a local solution, and that local solution is customized to you. And then you get into, this is where we see Stable Diffusion happening, where you download something and there's different models, but those models you can actually train to do those kinds of things. And so I think that's where you'll have kind of a mixture of those two, but it won't affect the general solution. It'll just affect yours. Next question.
Next question from Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia. Like to distribute video from a HDMI matrix switch to a TV in another room, perhaps via dedicated VLAN over Ethernet. Options?
One pretty easy option would be NDI. So you could use NDI to get there. You could have an NDI receiver on the other end, and you can have something that's emitting it from there. So that might be one way to do it if you have an already existing Ethernet. If that Ethernet is not going through a switch, if it's just going from one place to the other, you could also consider doing something like Geffen and other people make HDMI over Ethernet. And so you can look at those, and that'll just be HDMI in, HDMI out, and it'll be an Ethernet in between, but you can't go through any kind of switch. It's not really an Ethernet connection. It's not a true network connection. It's just using the cable. So you'd have to be kind of careful of that. Go ahead, Tom.
Fiber HDMI.
Yeah, and fiber HDMI could also do it. If you haven't already pulled Ethernet from one place to the other already. Next question.
Next question from Douglas Carmichael. Adobe has an AI enhanced speech service. There's a link to it there. How will tools like it change the role of audio professionals in the future?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm not worried because I work cheaper than AIs do.
Go ahead, John.
So Adobe showed, is it Spark? Is that their convention now? I can't remember what's called, Alex. Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't remember what it is, but yeah, Shasta.
They showed off at Spark deepfakes like 6-7 years ago, and then they had to retract because it caused such a stir in the industry.
Yeah,
that they said no, we're just showing technology. We're not deploying these yet. So there's a tidal wave coming of unrest.
Yeah, Bill.
I agree with that 100%. I used to say, and I've said here on the show a number of times, it's never been easier to get from 0 to 50% in quality. And it's always been just as hard to get from 50 anywhere approaching perfect in creative work or in work that's technological based. I do think that may be shifting and may be easier and easier to get to 70%. I've seen some algorithms that do a good job of repetitive tasks that do it almost as well as a person who understands the craft and has good ears can do. So I think it's going to continue to evolve, and it's just something we're going to have to deal with in the future. You have to bring something other than that 70% to the table if you want to excel in your industry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Javier.
Sorry, just while thinking about it, I think that a lot of the important things in audio engineer, as in any other production thing, is taste, not only about knowing how to do things, but deciding what tools to do and how to do it and be subtle about it. It's like when you see movies that, especially from the mid 90s to the 2000s, where computer graphics started to kicking in, and you could do a lot of things that in the moment seemed impressive, but when you look at them in hindsight, they're like tasteless, and it's like bad CGI. And I think the same is going to happen with AI. We're maybe for 2024 or 2025, you're going to be like, oh, this sounds good, but in 2030, you're going to be like, what were we thinking? So
yeah, and I think that I agree with you, and I think that the problem really is that it can get good, like it can take bad to good. Like I think that AI is going to take bad to good really, really quickly. But how do you get to that last little bit of quality? And I think that it is going to be difficult to close that gap because it's just, garbage in, garbage out to some degree. I mean, I have a lot of really great plugins for, from iZotope and everything else, but very rarely can I just add them and expect them to work. There's still a lot of, again, taste and trying to figure those things out. And even that is still a learning process for me. Next question.
From Harshit Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida, what is mainly gained from getting a 5K monitor? Contrast or more so for color?
Go ahead, John.
I have a 5K iMac Pro, and then I've got the LG Companion on next to it, and they're super bright. And on my Mac Mini, I have the LG 5K next to a Samsung 4K, and it looks dingy and dark. So the brightness of both of the 5Ks are astounding.
You go ahead, Tom.
You also get a full 4K window plus extra room for menus.
Next question.
Burkhard Friedrich from Eastenberg, Germany, wants to know, what are your recommendations to get the stop buying things loop from yesterday's office hours remote out of my head?
Go ahead, Javier.
If you listen carefully, the 12th month says keep buying things. So it's just a matter of powering through the other 11 months.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think a while back, Jeffrey Powers was the one that said, if you sing the By Menon jingle, that'll knock it right out of your head.
Hey, go ahead, Bill.
2 words, electroshock therapy is your only hope.
And a reminder, we're doing a second hour of just open Q&As today. So if you've got more questions, go ahead and throw them in. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, how much of a performance increase is the 32-core GPU over the 24-core GPU in the M1 Max? My primary workflows will be audio-related, but I also see myself streaming my work via Mimo Live and editing in Resolve.
I think that the 32 is going to make a difference for a lot of the stuff you're doing. So I think that those extra 8 cores would be worth getting if you can. Next question.
Next question from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. What tech helps you sleep and helps you track your sleep?
Go ahead, Javier.
To get to sleep, I use guided meditations. The Apple Fitness has a lot of guided meditations that I really like. And for tracking, I've been using an app called Sleep Cycle for the last, I'm not sure, like 10 years maybe, that keeps track of how you're sleeping and gives you some stats and everything. And since the last year that Apple released the whole sleep in the Apple Watch, I'm using like both. So it gives you, I don't try to get as into I only got 70%, I must be tired, because if you think you're tired, you're gonna get tired. But it helps you like knowing like, okay, so from 2 to 4 a.m. it's where I get most of my deep sleep. So if I get to bed after 2, I'm not gonna have deep sleep like normal rate. So those are the both things that I use.
Good, Bill.
I will say that Apple Watches are now doing sleep tracking. If you charge them properly and give them enough so that you can wear them overnight, it'll give you some good feedback on there. Interestingly enough, for me, the same thing that helps keep me interested when I'm exercising, which for me is audiobooks and listening to novels, that same thing will put me totally to sleep if I use them late at night. If I hear a calm, consistent voice that is really good at reading, it really lulls me to sleep. And I can't tell you, I've changed from 20 minutes, and then auto shut off down to about 5 minutes and auto shut up, put a book on, and it clunks me out every time. So weird.
I get up early. And I don't drink coffee after 2. and I find that my wife often comments on my nearly supernatural ability to lay down and be asleep in 2 minutes. So I get pretty agitated if I'm awake for more than 10. Next question.
Ronnie Hofsoy from Tromsø, Norway, asks, is it possible to control the Insta360 link with Companion, Isadora, or similar?
Go ahead, Tom.
With the latest firmware update, the Insta360 link does have a lot of hotkeys. So I would say yes.
So there's a ton of the new update added a lot of hotkeys of control. I haven't updated my Insta360. Yep. So I think that
really good update.
What I will say is that so you could have some of those updates. And when did that update come out, Tom? Was that recent? Last couple days?
About a week ago.
Yeah. And in the past, what we've seen with Insta360, part of what makes me excited about it is that they build APIs for all their other cameras are pretty open. And so I think that the link will probably end up having a lot of hooks down the road. I think this is probably a step towards that. Next question.
Next question in from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. Mitchell, how do you feed your Sony camera in terms of cabling? There are 2 ports, and they're both of the mini USB type and are right next to each other. Is there an integrated cable?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
There is not an integrated cable. I'm talking about the FX3, which I have up here. And actually, the 2 ports are a mini HDMI and a micro USB. And for the HDMI, I use something like this, the Tilta version. It's a adapter. So you have the mini going to the adapter, and the adapter takes the weight of the HDMI cable, so you're not constantly yanking on a small cable. And then for the USB, a right angle micro USB works really well because, again, it just is much more secure in terms of a connection because it has the actual cable housing to take up some of the slack.
Go, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say, I searched once upon a time for right angle mini USB. And interestingly enough, it came in like 5 flavors, and you can buy a pack of all of them, which says that it's an L one way, it's an L the other way, and it's an L out and in. You can buy a pack of 4, which will change that direction any way you need, depending on how you want to set up things. So you can find those little adapters online.
Next question.
Next question is for me, and the question is, this ad featuring Daniel Craig for Belvedere Vodka ends with a 4th wall crash. How do you feel about breaking this rule?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's an interesting spot, and I'll just briefly tell you what it is. It's Daniel dancing to music, and he's got some dance moves. But at the very end of it, they just crash through the 4th wall and back out, and they show the whole crew, all the equipment, and all the people involved, plus my favorite director, Tiger Waititi, doing his little direction. And that's part of the commercial. So in that particular instance, it's kind of nice to see the behind the scenes and all the people it takes to pull these things off. It is a 4th wall break because Daniel does acknowledge a camera at that point.
Go, Jesse.
Watch it again. The 4th wall break isn't at the end of the video.
Oh, there we go.
An Easter egg.
Yeah, I haven't been able to watch the whole thing. I skipped through it. I just skipped to the end, and wow, looks good. So it looks like it's really well shot, and it should be a lot of fun. So I think it's great. I love breaking the 4th wall. Like I love movies that break 4th walls. And so when they're talking straight to you, I think it's just a great way to put things together. Next question.
Next question for Douglas Carmichael. What does the panel think of the Meta Quest Pro versus the Quest 2?
Well, it's got more power. It's got more power. You can do things. I don't know what apps are really taking full advantage of the Pro as opposed to the Quest 2. So and I have the Quest 2. I don't have the Quest Pro. I've kind of decided to just wait it out for a little while. I think that for me, the VR world is a little stagnant at the moment. And so I'm waiting to see what Apple does. I'm waiting to kind of see what happens next year. I don't feel like I've seen anything recently that has been enough. And again, I was in the immersive world when it first started and spent a couple of years really developing a lot of content for it. But I don't find a lot of things that are that compelling right now. And so I think I've just decided to take a break. So like, I don't know what, I put them on every once in a while to see what's going on, but I feel like we're in kind of, they haven't really built that killer thing for a while. Go ahead, Jesse.
I think one of the biggest things, the lowest ceiling for VR for me is that with any interactive engagement, you have to be sitting on like a moving platform. They have to simulate your movement in association with something else. Do you think we're ever going to see that get cured, that limited mobility in VR?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's definitely things that could be done, for that. There have been things built where you have, and you saw like fictional versions of it in Ready Player One, but there are definitely things out there that let you run in different directions that have already been created. It's another device that you sit there and you kind of run and move around. In fact, I have a feeling that I was watching something recently. I realized that at some point when we get into motion capture, the hard part is going to be a lot of folks that were really excited about VR now have to be in really good shape, to compete because they're going to have to they're going to do the things that their character's doing rather than pushing little keys. So there's going to be a point where you go, oh, I can do a first person shooter more effectively in a motion capture suit than hitting a keyboard. Like there's going to be some moment where people realize that. And then they're going to start doing that. But then the next thing is they're going to start getting tired. Before you know it, you're going to have people working out so that they can play the virtual stuff better than others, as it gets competitive. So I think that that's going to be interesting. And I do think that, I think the VR is going to be big. I just don't know when. And I feel like the developments that I've seen recently, I put them on every once in a while. And again, I'm pretty sensitive to it because I don't want to buy lenses. I think that's the big thing is I don't want to replace the lenses every single time with my Quest, and I wear glasses. And I find that the fact that they don't have a diopter is really frustrating. Like it's just, it really took a lot of fun out of it for me. I destroyed a pair of glasses, wearing them underneath my thing. And so I think that the lack of a diopter is pretty devastating because there's such a huge percentage of nerds and geeks that wear glasses. Like if you look at this panel. So anyway, that I think that's a problem. And I think that they haven't paid enough attention to that problem. Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace, Austin, Texas. Discuss workforce VR, AR, XR, extended reality. For example, according to a link that he's used here, companies using AR have reported a 46% reduction in time to complete tasks and average productivity improvements of 32%, according to IBM.
Go ahead, Harshid.
Yesterday, I was looking through Sony's website, and they have a product that they're working on called XR Catch, and it was related to vision impairment. But what it did, it took haptics, and it gave you the proponent of actually playing catch. And when I was reading the article, it stated where they thought of, should we get a glove? Should we get, these extensive devices, or is it more of the feeling? And so with VR and XR, or at this point we could just call it XR because some are augmented reality tidbits, whereas some are virtual reality tidbits. And to mix all the bits together, we do get a bite, and it's going to depend on how people present it, right? It's just like any old presentation. If we present it with a good understanding of how to use a product from start to finish, then it's going to expand into the market. We've had a lot of people getting into the so-called workspace where Microsoft had their product. Google has Google Glass. But yes, some are using it in their workspaces, but they're so particular. Maybe it's only Silicon Valley, maybe it's only New York. So I think introduction to a product and then ease of use from start to finish is always going to keep that sustaining product go further, and especially in the XR space.
Yeah. I think without more context, those numbers, 32%, and 46% don't mean anything. think that's the real problem is that I don't know. I'd have to see a lot of context to understand how that would be there. And you can manipulate any kind of testing to get a number relative to what you're trying to do. So I don't really think that, I don't really know what that means. But what I will say is that I think that we are going to get to a point where we use AR a lot more. And we're going to, I'm buying I have to get a new under my TV. My TV's not sitting on it, but it needs to sit underneath it, like a shelving unit that sits underneath the thing. I went to Amazon and it said, literally, if I was on my phone, I didn't see it on the desktop, but if I was on my phone, it said, would you like to see this in your living room? And I was like, yeah, sure. I hit it and it just popped out and it snapped to the wall. like it just went whoop. And it was in scale and I could look at it. It was grabbing some lighting and I could see what it looked like. And it made me far more likely to buy that one than buy one without that visualization. And that's where we're going to start to see those things. And I will say that, there are definitely companies working on this. I mean, Amazon's doing a lot of the stuff that they're doing. Home Depot, IKEA. You can imagine being able to have your manuals become something that it shows you what you're going to do next, and you literally pick it up and just show you what's in front of me, and little arrows go, grab this next, grab this next, grab this next. That's all coming. We're not that far away, a year or two away from starting to see that roll out. And again, for us as media developers, that's a whole new world of opportunity. As building all that stuff out. We started playing with those ideas 20 years ago in Pixel Core. So we could see it coming, but it's almost here. Next question.
Next one, question coming in from Douglas Carmichael. Do you think we'll see a significant performance improvement with the forthcoming M2 Max Ultra versus the M1?
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm not sure. It depends on what you consider by significant. Yes, it is going to be faster, but I've noticed this trend coming up, which is meaningful speed improvement versus not meaningful. And what I mean by that, when I was starting out and I had to render out a video, it might take a half an hour. And then a new chip or a new card or something came in and it lowered it to 10 minutes. And that was a significant improvement in productivity for me. Now in the current era, sometimes revving a computer for me will get me a render that goes from 9 seconds to 3 seconds. And I'm asking myself, is the cost of that really worth it in terms of the productivity value I get back? And I'm hearing things like they just announced yesterday that the new Mac Pros that they're designing, they've actually cut off, I think, if this rumor is correct, the high end. And I think it's because the cost of incremental improvement in processing didn't give them enough to feel like the market wanted to spend the extra money to go at the very top. And I think we're already saturating what a lot of people's tasks need in terms of these off-the-shelf computers. So I'm wondering if it's going to slow down a little. There'll always be a top end who needs that super production. But how many people are unsatisfied with the machines they can afford to get right now and use? And I think it's a lot.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yes.
I think that it's, it will be a significant improvement for some operations. And I think that that's what, the things that, and especially things that are, what's really happening is a lot of developers are finding that if they really customize their code to take full advantage of the M series computers, that they're seeing massive increases in quality, so and speed and production productivity. But they have to really write to it. What isn't working is I'm going to kind of write something for the Mac and kind of write something for the PC. That's not really working very well. I mean, it works okay. It's incremental, but the companies that are really focusing on it, we're going to suck all the marrow out of these chips are getting just incredible returns. So I think it's more about educating and making sure that those libraries are available than it is about the chip at this point, because we're not fully utilizing most of the M series chips as they are. But I definitely have apps that are bringing my Mac. I have a Mac, so I didn't get the Ultra, but I have the M1 Studio, and I'm bringing it I'm crunching it every day. I could use more power. It's a lot faster than my last computers, but I could definitely afford to have more power. And I have to admit that if I knew that the Mac, I bought a Max because I thought that the Pro would come out this fall and I wanted to save money. I think that I would have bought the Ultra if I had known that we were going to get delayed. Next question.
From Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, Paul asks, with all the advances in AI and going to a whole higher level, what's keeping dumbed down Amazon, A-Device, Google Home, Facebook Portal, and others from stepping up their game?
Javier.
I think there's a couple of things. The first one for me is I think it's this very different written language than spoken language, especially because when you throw different written, like if you write the same question different, the AI is going to give you different answers. So that's, I think, the first one, although that's going to be solved rather quickly. The second one is the open. Well, right now the AI are trained with a subset of information. So it's like when you go to Jeopardy, they're going to just ask you about this category. There's not gonna open-ended. The question is gonna be like from this stuff and like new stuff or like your own. Like we ask a lot of these assistants like to help you with your stuff, with your contacts, your calendar, your email. So it has to learn all the time. And the third one I think is perception, because right now ChatGPT is being used by a subset of people that we are very like future-looking and computer trusting, if that's a word. And the other products are mass market, so you have to be very careful. I mean, the brands, I think they're very careful because it's easier for people to understand a dumb Siri, Alexa, or whatever, than a super intelligent one. So if it started doing like things that are freaking people like ChatGPT is doing, but inside your house, I think that's not a good look for the companies.
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, Amazon, Google, and Facebook are the AI is a small component in a much larger portfolio of products and services that they offer, and they're trying to get into everybody's house all the time. And there's just like a different amount of room for error when it comes to experimentation. When you look at something like Chat GPT, the company is more perceived as a young, scrappy startup. So it's just a broader margin for error, and AI has an implicit need for margin for error when you're implementing it.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm also thinking that sometimes we looked at this from the point of view of technologists who understand this technology and always want to be up at the bleeding edge. And I think there's a huge swath of the market out there that they don't understand and they don't want to keep up with it, and they're not playing the game. I use as an example the fact that my wife and I bought a Facebook portal for a shirt tail relative of ours who we knew did a lot of Zoom work. And we thought, well, we'll send this to them. They'll be able to bump up their Zoom calls to 720p and just by having the portal and things like that. Well, a year later, they still haven't hooked it up and they're still on their laptop doing things, even though they are in business. And even though I can completely understand it could have improved their presentation, they never got it in their head that they should take the time to learn this technology to improve it, because it just didn't matter that much to them. So I always have to step back and remember that not everybody is like all of us here on the panel that are absolutely invested in understanding this stuff and using it in our daily lives.
Yeah, it's funny. On the opposite side of that, I gave my parents a very early on the Alexa, the little screen Alexa that for their thing, just because I thought that they'd enjoy it. It sat in a box for a year, just because they didn't know what to do with it. One of my nieces opened it up, of course, and had it working in about 4 or 5 minutes, and then had it all set up. And now my parents use it every day. so like all day. Like they're constantly calling things out and asking things and everything else. So it is that startup, I think that's something that, as far as usage goes, I do agree with what was been said before, that these companies are all capable of a lot more, but if it says the wrong thing, they're going to be held accountable. And so I think the Chat GPT says the wrong thing all the time. It says really impressive things and they sound really good, but it's often inaccurate. And if Alexa or Google or Apple were as inaccurate as ChatGPT, people would be up in arms, and there'd be like congressional hearings, and there'd be conspiracy theories, and everything else. It'd be like, so that's the ChatGPT gets a lot of room for error, but putting it into something that is mission critical is an issue. Yeah, go ahead, John. Real
quick. Yeah, Alexa, it was locked. So don't forget, Microsoft invested $1 billion in OpenAI,
right?
And Google owns DeepMind, and so they're playing the game.
There's been mentions from Google folks that said we can do everything that OpenAI can do. We're just not doing it because it scares everybody. And all the stuff, they're letting them take all the arrows. Like they're sitting there like, what? Like let's let these little companies, because the problem with the big companies is they're too big of a target. These are big lawsuits, and so I think they're just watching and letting OpenAI and Stable Diffusion and all these other things kind of clear the field for them, and then they're going to move in. But yeah, there are big. I mean, they've been working on this for a long time, and with lots and lots of money. There's been whatever's been invested in OpenAI, but there's also been billions and billions and billions spent in each company, not aggregate, but each company working on this. And so OpenAI still, startups can always move faster than big companies. And so it has that advantage, but I think they're letting them clear the field. Next question.
Bob Sturdivant in San Antonio, Texas. Anyone with experience using Insta360 cameras with Matterport software? If so, how do you rate the quality of the product?
I've looked at some of the examples on the website, and it looks pretty impressive. I don't know how it would work as well as it looks like it's working inside of that platform. So it'd be really interesting to do more testing with it. Basically, what the Insta360, we talk about the Link a lot, but what they're really known for are 360 cameras, with lenses, with cameras on both sides, and it gets a 360 image. And Matterport used to have hardware that you used, and it had like a little inexpensive LiDAR that it would do, and it would create a 3D scene as well as a walkthrough, very quick walkthrough of a location, which is really cool. And I used to own one and paid for the service or whatever because we used it for previs. But one thing that Matterport got good at was that they stopped just trying to build their own hardware. In fact, I don't even know if they still do build their own hardware. Maybe they do, but they moved upward by partnering with Leica to do the Link. The BLK 360 fits into that, so that goes up, and they've gone downward to phones and these Insta360 cameras. What I will say is the imagery on that's on their website with the Insta360s looks really impressive. Like you could totally do it that way, and it would be so much faster, because you're capturing the whole image in one take. So if it's actually working that way and that's actually effective, it's pretty impressive. So maybe we'll try to do some tests in the future. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, on the Ed Sheeran Mathematics Tour, Ed's front-of-house console is a Digico ST7 with a quantum engine, and the support act is mixed on an Allen & Heath D-Live. Considering both companies are in the same Audiotonics group, what can the SD7 do that the D7 can't?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm just going to speculate. I have not had personal experience with either of these boards, but I can make this observation. If they're under the same company, chances are they're sharing a lot of technology for both of them, but you can be sure that the Digico has got better parts and probably faster processors. So the advantage, I say, goes to the Digico because it's a much bigger and much more expensive board.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I'm going to guess there's just two different front of house engineers, one of them being incredibly familiar with console A and the other being incredibly familiar with console B. They want to work with what they're used to working with. So I think it's the talent expressing themselves and getting the hardware that they are the most comfortable with to do the job that they have to do. It
could be. I actually think it's more likely cost and size. The D-Live, I believe, is a bit smaller than the Digico, and it's also costs a lot less money. And so I think that they might be making a decision about, hey, we don't need to have two Digicos, or they might even have two Digicos because they have a primary and a backup or something available. So, but I think it's probably, and what happens is, I don't know enough about Audiotonics, but what often happens is that from a brand perspective, they do, as Mitchell was saying, break up. We're going to put the less expensive things over here and the more expensive things over there. And they do that so that they can keep those brands separate. And because you can't build every console with the best stuff of everything. You have to think about cost and making it available to a wider group. Next question.
From Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington, bought the wonderfully priced Behringer Bigfoot all-in-one USB studio condenser microphone. Planning to use it in my office for Zoom meetings. How do I address it? Down the tube, talk past it, and which setting?
We did play with it. I have it. I was actually sitting in another room right now, but I did buy it to test it, and I think that it's a lot better than a lot of mics that are in that price range. So I think that it's pretty cool. you want to talk across almost every mic. You're talking into a mic, ends up with lots of plosives. So you'll see that I'm here with this mic. It's a little hard to see with the shirt, but I'm talking across it, not into it, so that I don't get plosives. And then I would probably still end up using. There's a one that is it looks kind of like this, and that's going to be your cardioid-ish kind of thing, and that's probably the one that is it's going to have the most off-axis rejection, and you want to talk across that one to make that work. The one that looks like I think that there's one that looks like this, like two circles there. We found that actually sounds better, but only I'm going to guess it's only going to be an environment that is really quiet. You know, I am literally in a tent of blankets, so mine is pretty forgiving. But I think that if you were in a regular room, you'd have a hard time making that actually work. So because it's basically using both ends. So anyway, that's what we'd probably take a look at. But hopefully, we'll be looking forward to you jumping on into after hours and possibly office hours and showing us in action. Next question.
Ian Alford in London, UK. I'm using a Blackmagic 4K and the picture looks washed out and lacking definition. Any tips?
Go ahead, Jesse.
It sounds like you have the lookup tables turned off. That's the first thing I would check.
Yeah. So what's happening there is that you don't have a LUT, or a lookup table is what Jesse was referring to. The LUTs are, I'm going to convert from one color space to another. And so, and when you think about a LUT, it's not that complicated. If you think about, if you're in Photoshop and you have a curve, that's usually for one channel. And if you made a curve for every channel, you would need 3 dimensions because you have red, green, and blue. And that LUT is simply, the LUT is just that curve, but it's applied to a cube. That's why they call it a cube, literally a .cube file. And so where you have, and I don't know which one is which, but you have basically red, green, and blue, all those curves are being calculated at the same time, for these points. And so that, and then it can have a certain number of points. But anyway, so what happens is the log that comes in is coming in at a certain, and it needs to be changed. You need to, pull it and push it to get it to a look that you're looking for. If you're doing Rec 709, there's lots of LUTs out there, and you can create LUTs and you can work on them. I would highly recommend. We're going to talk more about LUTs next year, but I would recommend looking at playing with your own. The good news is if you're a Blackmagic 4K, what came with it is Resolve. So you can just for free put it into Resolve and build the look that you want. So what you do is you go into the color page in Resolve and you get it to look just the way you want it. And there's lots of tutorials on how to do this, and we can jump into after hours and talk about it, but you can get it to look just the way you want it to look. And then you can select that. If you right click on the, you can actually export a LUT. So you can export it out and then literally load it back into the camera. And so that is a way for you to create your own look, but you can download a lot of them. The easiest way to do this is that on the last page of the Blackmagic 4K, there is a LUT. And what you're probably not doing is having something set to, it's probably to film. It's probably just film or no LUT. You can set it to video or extended video. I'd recommend just go ahead with extended video. You can always add contrast a little bit later. And then just make sure that your monitor out and your record are set that, but don't do it to both. If you set it to record, don't set it to monitor out, being the LUT, because you'll get a double LUT. It'll actually apply that LUT twice and it'll look really clear. Next question.
Mike Edwards from Brooklyn, New York. Morning, guys. Is it possible to use an all-Mac workflow utilizing 2 separate Macs, using a Mac running SPX graphics into another using Mimo Live? What would you recommend, if not as a better flow?
I think you could. I think if you're using SPX, you'll end up using the web interface for that. So you would have to use the web output for SPX. You can use Casper. What we do for this show, all the lower thirds here that you see are all SPX. We're using Casper, which is a more native app that is running on a PC, and it's doing key fill out from there. So that's how we create that there. But you should be able to do it with the web output there. Yeah, absolutely. To Mimo. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia asked, I am asking for a basic M1 Mac Mini for Christmas from family to add to my setup. Does panel have a suggestion to use case, i.e. Zoom rooms, etc.?
I'll go ahead, Jesse.
You're looking at an M1 Mac Mini right now. I use it for a lot of forward-facing communications for a company. Just before you buy it, make sure you're aware of how much hard drive space and RAM you need because you're locked in.
Right. Yeah, as much RAM as you can get. Yeah, so I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that the big thing is the Mac Minis just give you a lot more flexibility. So you're going to have better I/O, and a lot more speed if you don't have a Mac Mini yet. Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's not a big ask to go from 32 gigabytes to 64. I think it's like $50 difference.
If it's $50, it's worth it. Otherwise, I think Tony will have a hard time using 64 with the utilization of how he's using this right now. 64 gigs is a lot. And if you're not doing really large data sets, you're probably not going to need it. But if it's $50, it's worth it. If it's more than $50, probably not worth it. Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas asked, I listen to a lot of books on audio. For example, Green Lights, Work the System, but some literary friends of mine say it doesn't count as reading. Should I care?
Javier.
No, you should not care. I mean, at least reading is reading and getting the information. I really enjoy audiobooks as well, especially the unabridged ones. I started listening, and that's basically like someone reading the book to you. But as the time has passed, I also use services like Blinkist that has like this 15-minute guided like Cliff Notes, but in audio. So it's for me, it's about getting the content and understanding. And sometimes you read the audiobook or listen to the audiobook, and you want to have the physical book or the digital book or whatever, and you want to have the written part. Or sometimes you just get information and enjoy the story or whatever. So don't listen to them.
Go ahead, Bill.
Not just no, heck no. No one should tell you what you should enjoy ever. And particularly in terms of consuming creative work from somebody, the written word on a page, beautiful. It's been a huge part of my life, and nothing I like more than diving into a book. But when I'm using audiobooks, there's nothing more enjoyable to be in that moment than being free from having to see it. I can do it while I'm exercising. I get the added benefit of a hopefully great performance by a quality reader who can act out the parts and bring something to it that maybe was not the same as was in my head. And I enjoy all of those parts of it. So no one should ever tell you how you consume creative work ever.
Actually, I'm now over 30 years. I mean, I started with audiobooks when they were cassettes. Like they were cassettes, and I put them in there and I listened to them while I was driving. And I am pretty specific about it. I have reference materials. Reference is something that I buy in books. So cooking books, other materials that are things that I'm going to look at. I'm going to refer. I'm going to jump non-linearly. That's the problem with audiobooks, is jumping non-linearly is hard. So I either get Kindle or I get a book. I usually get all Kindle because I have my entire library in my iPad. So I love the fact that I can just open something up and look at it. My cookbooks, I don't like getting my iPads covered with stuff. So my cookbooks are the only thing that I have that are physical, and I have a growing collection of cookbooks, mostly modern cuisinists, but a lot of other things that are there. That I use, but reference is what I use for text, and then nonfiction for audiobooks for me, and then fiction is movies. I don't want to listen to the nonfiction fiction because it might turn into a movie and then it'll ruin it for me. So I just want to watch the movies and do the thing. I like fiction to be more condensed because I don't have a lot of time. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, in this behind-the-scenes video from Ed Sheeran Mathematics Tour, they showed a custom on-screen user interface for Ed's looper pedals. I do recognize Ableton on the screens, but how would you build a custom user interface for Ableton?
And you have stumped us because there's no Ableton Live heavy users here. So let's see if we can have an Ableton maybe a second hour or something in the not too distant future, and we can try to figure it out. I know folks like Todd Reynolds, if you see him on in the after hours, would probably know that answer. Next question.
Ronnie Offsey from Tromsø, Norway, asking, what type of mobile measurement test meter or tool is absolutely indispensable during a remote production, like digital multimeter, cable tester, or similar?
There is a I'm just trying to think of if I have one here. There's an audio box that we use very frequently, and here it is. I knew I had it. I don't know how long this will be this way with Dante, but this Q box, this is a Whirlwind makes this Q box, and I've had this. I don't know how long. It can it's a mic and line tester, and I have used it on and off for trying to figure out if something's working. It can generate signals. You can also plug stuff into it and listen to it. It has a little speaker that'll play out, so you can just literally plug an XLR into here, and it just this has been super useful. Another thing that we tend to use are kilowatts. Kilowatt is a little plug. It just tells you what's going through it, and plugging something into your system to understand what that is better. Multimeters are also very good to have as far as testing things specifically. In larger events, we have a voltage measurement. These are things that you literally put it around the cable, and it'll tell you what's passing through it. And so that can also be, especially with higher voltage and more complex measurements, can be very useful. And then those are hardware tools. The things that we use the most of anything are video and audio scopes. And so, I still use Spectre on some of our machines, but otherwise we use, there's a Sonic Atom is the other one that we use. And it's an audio scope tool. And then of course, Nobe Omniscope is the other one that we use for video. Go ahead, Bill.
And it continues to migrate. I still use all those traditional tools as well, but I'm finding more and more that the things that are migrating onto mobile, the mobile platform, you can get external samplers that will take and throw scopes on your phone, audio multimeters, even the internal microphones are getting better in those platforms. And so we're not all the way there. You can't completely replace all the traditional tools at this point, in my opinion, with just a phone running software, but we're seeing it get better and better over the course of time as the cameras and the audio inputs in the phone get better. And I think eventually that's going to end up being our multi-tool of choice in the field.
Next question.
From Harshid Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida, here on our panel. It's December. What can we do to improve the movement glass to the house for fiber?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I had an interesting conversation with the Comcast business associate, called me promoting direct fiber to my business. I have a business account. And we got into an interesting conversation about last mile, which is a big deal, especially when you're using fiber, because you don't necessarily have fiber just because you have it. It might be that it's just the last mile. It might be cable from a fiber point of presence. So the overall discussion came around the pricing. And the pricing for a residential use of the fiber in the last mile means you're sharing that bandwidth with other people in that particular point of presence. The difference with the business side is that you are not sharing it, and there's a huge difference in price. Because I was complaining, I pay $250 a month for regular cable, 300 down, 30 up. And he said, well, you can probably get close to matching that with fiber, but you'll do much better with a residential connection.
Yeah. So we have 2 years before the next election, and we need to think about how we frame this and how we get it out to the right people to have them start thinking about it as being a plank on different parties, to really think about. It's one of those things that, framed well, so far they haven't been, and it might not be something that the parties do because they're so paid by the telecommunications company. They're so well paid. There's so much that is being funded for their campaigns by the telecommunications company, because what they desperately don't want is what we're talking about here. But I think at this point, utilities should probably become, cable should become a utility, and it should be fiber, and it should be fiber to every house. And we should charge the folks in the city a little bit more and make sure that it basically covers it to go out into all the areas. And it's not something we haven't done before. We have power, we have running water, we have telephones. All of those things were run to everybody's house, and everybody had to share a little bit of it. And we should be thinking about that. And we should think about how we push it forward, either through the standard political structure or on the outside by creating a hot griddle that they have to stand on. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, we as users or buyers are in a pretty good position right now, because here's what's going on: is there's a battle between all the ISPs out there to get that fiber into their homes. And the value of having you as a subscriber exceeds the cost of the charge that you're charging you. So they're liable to give you a greater deal just so they know that you are the guy that picked for that particular fiber for your home.
Yeah, I know that when we called, I was kind of amazed when we called Comcast and said we're thinking about canceling Comcast, how quickly they made a deal. The other thing to know is that you can oftentimes make deals pretty quickly when you, which is interesting because, and then I got this thing that says that Frontier told us that they're coming. That's what happened. Is I'm sure that Comcast. So what happens is that Comcast had to give pole access to probably Frontier, and then they know a year or two out that the internet's coming, and then they try to make deals with everybody to lock it down. I just got a little thing somewhere from Frontier that says they're coming. Now, here's the worst part: is I'm not going to switch from Comcast to Frontier. I'm just going to get both. So I was like, now I have two different providers because Comcast drops out about 3 or 4 times a year, and usually in the most inconvenient times. Next question.
Next question in from Tom Ferguson in Phoenix, Arizona. On your mark, get set, go. Are we almost ready to change the world with our office hours influencers hitting up companies for change?
Yeah. We're a little behind on it, but a lot of it had to do with we were going to make some requests from Zoom and Blackmagic on that was going to be our first little push. But I've been trying to research exactly what we want to ask for, so that you don't want to ask for something that isn't going to happen. So we're kind of looking at that movement, and but we are going to start. I probably won't be. No one's going to see it if we do it right now. But as we come out of the beginning of the year, I think we should start thinking about those, and those could be something we brainstorm maybe on things that we want to change, and then as a group. The interesting thing here is I also want to think about the rollout. Like if everybody gets exactly the same worded thing, then it might not be as effective. So I've been thinking about it a little bit. We should brainstorm in this in after hours. We'll think of a time where we can brainstorm it. But I think that we can definitely get people's attention. Not many people, even in a large company, will you see 200 or 300 people ask for the same thing. So we can definitely at least get discussions going in different companies about things that we think would help the industry move forward. And I think that that's a really useful thing for us to do if used responsibly. So, but I think that we as content creators that are really working on this and thinking about it, we're the right people to ask for what we want. And if we ask for it all at one time, we have a much better chance of getting it. Next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York, asking, I've been looking in and can't quite figure this info, but what states have the most rural fiber connections?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I don't know if it's true or not, but it should be the flat states in the middle of the country, only because it is so much easier to string fiber cable through those than it is. I was surprised. I lived most of my life in Phoenix, which is a very flat valley with just a couple of things you have to work around when you're talking about stringing wires. And here in San Diego, we are a whole series of hills and valleys. And I look at the infrastructure it takes to get signal lines and everything else, and how it is so much more engineering and tunneling and digging to move from this neighborhood to that neighborhood here than it is where I originally grew up. And so I think geography has something to do. So I'm surprised that the more flat plain states haven't really outstripped everybody else.
I don't know whether, I think that the other thing is it's how much fiber per head. There's some that may, I read something that alluded to the fact that Maryland had the most fiber in Maryland or Virginia, and those two have an enormous number of government agencies that are using their systems, and so as a result, there was more of core content that was. So Maryland and Virginia, I've heard, are the two big ones as far as fiber goes, and then as far as pure mileage, California. I think has the highest, but it's the density is different. But I think that California is just a bigger state with a lot of people. So I think that those are the big leaders from what I read that in some study, but I can't remember which one. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, asking, we're considering doing a retro gaming tournament as a fundraiser for shooting cabinets and pinball machines. What gotchas should we look out for? I'm worried about reflections, obviously, but are scan lines likely to be an issue?
Go ahead, Jesse.
The biggest gotcha I'd be looking out for is refresh rates. And if you're at a normal, modern, retro arcade, you're going to be having every type of refresh rate. You'll have tungsten, fluorescent, and LED bulbs, depending on the cabinet. You're also dealing with cathode ray tubes if you're working with retro machines. and like LCD panels, if there are also modern rebuilds of retro machines. And I would just go in there early and often with the cameras that you're actually going to be shooting on and just stress test so much and see what shutter angle you're going to need to work with. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's no one single shutter angle that can handle all the different refresh rates that you're walking into.
You good, Bill?
What Jesse said, when I used to shoot a lot of this kind of content back in when that was actually a thing, the Sony cameras that came out of the era had a function called clear scan, when you can literally dial in sub 38.57 megahertz for a scan for your camera. And we were constantly trying to make sure that the scan rate of the screen we were shooting, mostly cathode ray tubes, as you will be finding on these historic video games, we'd find the right scan rate to sync with it. Without that, it was virtually impossible. So I agree 100% with Jesse. Test ahead of time.
I for a long time I played pinball with my daughter. We'd go to there was a pinball space that would happen to be near the farmer's market that I went to, and we went, and it went under during COVID, but I always wanted to put cameras in the pinball machines. Like, I just think that would be a lot of fun, is to get little spy cameras and put them in there so you can cut to like the ball coming right at you, type of thing. I think that there's definitely places I thought about it every time I played while I was watching my daughter play. And I was like, you could put a camera there and never get hit. Like it would, like there's places definitely in the pinball machine that are not reachable by the ball. And so I think that would be a lot of fun. Next question.
Lenny Nelson in San Antonio, Texas. Does listening to podcasts, presentations, and audiobooks at 1.5 times speed all the time do something to our brains? I take a moment to formulate a thought, and I wonder if I feel slow because I consume media this way.
Good, Javier.
I think you become impatient with slow-moving media. It doesn't happen to me in real life. I mean, if people talk slowly, I don't have problems. But with slowly moving, like recorded things, it's very hard for me. I tend to listen. If I want to learn something, I try to go 1.5 or even above. If I know the subject, I'll go to 2x and only like rewind if I miss something. Only for fiction, like performance, like audiobooks, I try to keep it between 1 and 125 because I think you start losing the performance, like the nuances if you go faster. But for getting information, 1.5 is a blessing.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I'm right there with Javier. I tend to be a 1.2 guy for novels and books that I know the author is exceptional with language, because I want the rhythm of the way they wrote those sentences to come through for me the way it was intended. When I get past that, it all starts to become a blur. Now, if I'm consuming information, that's a totally different thing. But I don't want somebody to speed read me poetry. That's not the right way to do things in my mind.
Yeah. I listen at 1.5 for everything because I don't listen to fiction on audio. So I listen to 1.5 up to 2.5, and it really just depends on the person that's speaking. As far as that goes, I find that here's the funny thing is I find that listening to a digital text to speech, I can listen to it faster than a human. The humans slur too much sometimes, or they have peculiarities in their voice that make it hard for me to understand what they're saying. But I can consistently, if I open up the Kindle app and I set it to 2x, I can consistently listen at 2x, and it's how the words are enunciated. I actually find it much easier to listen to a book at speed because I don't have so many, I tend to be easily distracted. I don't have so many other thoughts going in my head between the words. So the problem when it goes slow is that I think about 6 other things by the time it gets to the next sentence. And when it's going fast, I just absorb it and I listen to it, and I listen to The Economist books, The Economist, Foreign Affairs, a couple other, and then I have VOA. So it's not Voice of America, but it's a collection of all these ones. I learned about it because, of course, Foreign Affairs uses it as part of their services, or they have some kind of cross trading, which was very effective because then I went and subscribed to this other thing as well. But I listen to a lot of stuff that way. But I listen to it definitely at speed. I can't listen to it at anywhere close to 1x. Like I go back to 1x and it literally just feels like everything's moving in slow motion, and it's super painful actually for me to listen to. And I admit though, in person, I tend to hang out and talk to people that talk fast. Like if you talk slow, I'm like, oh, it's really slow. Like it takes a long time to get there. And I have to really like somebody to be in a long conversation with them when they're talking slow. Because I'm like, okay, I gotta go. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'd love to do a second hour on this, but it only might take a half an hour to do it.
We'll do a whole second hour. I will say this gets back into the whole power. This is what the speed is one of the main reasons that I talk about the fact that no one should ever lecture live again online, like ever, never, ever. Give people the content. We're going to do some conferences this year. We're going to do our own little conferences. They'll start small, but they might get bigger. All the presentations will be released at least a week before the conference, and they will all. So what we were going to tell you is all going to be part of, hey, here's a bunch of files that you can listen to. Then we're going to do Q&A. We're going to do, and we'll give you a summary of what we had talked about in that area. But the advantage of speed control, you can't do that in the real world. You can't do it in a live presentation. And when I watch people do live presentations now, I literally have a narcoleptic reaction to people giving me a live presentation of data. And it's because it's not moving fast enough for me. And for folks who are fast, you can speed it up. And for folks who need to hear something again, they can repeat it. And you can't do that with a live presentation. And so what you're bringing up, Lenny, is the number one reason why no one should present that. Next question.
Next question from Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. No one left out? How will we engage all the time zones where office hours is buzzing 24/7, like a bustling town hall?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because now that we're kind of heading into that 24-hour thing, when I first had friends in Australia and things like that, and they were coming into meetings that I was involved with, I started to realize, wait a second, it's late night for me and it's the first thing in the morning for you. And there are going to be times when I try to reach out to you and it's going to be in the middle of the night. And I have to watch that. That's why I have 3 different time zone clocks on the wall so I can keep track of everybody's reality. I think it's going to be great because visiting a different time zone in office hours will be like visiting a little bit of a different community. You'll see different people there. Some of the group will be sleeping. Some of them will be actively engaged in things. I think it's going to be fun. I mean, and if you have insomnia for a particular night, you have people to talk to. It's great.
Next question.
Next question in from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. I walked down the buy that list and stopped at the Wacom tablet. The current 16-inch model is around €1,600 here in Germany. Are there more cost-effective solutions?
Go ahead, Jesse.
I wonder if you've looked at the iPad Pro. I don't know what your needs are exactly, but you might be able to simulate a lot of what a Wacom does on an iPad, and might be a bit more expensive, but you get a free iPad with it.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Well, the answer is there is a Wacom One Creative, it's called, tablet out on Amazon.de. Here you go. It's €292.
Yeah, the One is the way to go. The Wacom One. That's what I'm using here is the Wacom One, and it's much less expensive. I have some of the other ones. I actually like the Wacom One better because it's just simpler to use. The connections are better than the older Intuos or the Cintiqs. So I prefer the Wacom One, and it's again, a third the cost. So I would definitely look at that for if you're doing telestration. If you really want high-end Wacom tablets, then you're going to want to use the Cintiq. It's got better sensitivity and better resolution. Next question.
From Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas. Paul asks, follow on to Ronnie from Norway's question, what is the best way to test all types of batteries and USB chargers and cables?
Those are all different. I mean, I have to admit that I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble with this, but we don't really test the batteries. We replace them constantly, for different sections because we can't afford for them to go wrong. We don't use, I have to admit, in production, we don't use that many batteries anymore. So it's not as big of a deal. But when we do, we have new ones. They're not rechargeable because the rechargeable batteries, the voltage falls off really, really fast. And that becomes a problem for us but again, we don't, in the grand scheme of how much waste do we create, we don't create a lot of waste anymore because there's a lot of things we just don't use those for. But in the areas that we do put replaceable batteries in, we burn through them, pretty high end ones, and that's because we can't afford it to go wrong. Bill.
And don't forget the joys of a simple multimeter with a couple of probes. You can do continuity testing and determine the voltage of batteries and things like that. So I think probably everybody on the panel has one in a drawer somewhere around, just in case you happen to have that circumstance when you need to look at the resistance of something, or whether or not that 9-volt battery is actually putting out 7.3 volts and is about to give up the ghost. And I'm trying to talk because I know Alex is looking for something that he's going to amaze us with. And so I'm really just paddling in place, dog paddling verbally.
No,
Bill, you don't use a 9-volt battery for your tongue?
Hey, you can tongue test those. Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah, nothing like tongue testing a 9-volt.
Yeah.
I can't find it. I have a little USB tester. It's sitting somewhere. I was just using it. But you can plug USB in and it'll tell you what voltage, it'll give you the data. And it looks like a little star. And if you just do a USB tester, it looks like a little star with all these connectors. And you can plug it in and it'll give you data about what's actually happening there. Next question.
From Harshid Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida, right here on our panel, to Jesse. Which Sennheiser do you like using more?
Jesse.
I'm assuming you're talking microphones, and in the studio we're using an MK4 for the home studio. When we get into the recording studio, we go. That's not what we go to. We go straight to the MD441U. That's what we go to. Sorry about that.
Nice. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say, I probably used 7 different ones over the course of time. And in my early career as an announcer, we never picked our own microphone. We went into studios and we used whatever the engineer hung in front of me. I think I spent my first 4 years in radio in front of a Sennheiser MD421U. And so when I went out on my own and started doing my own voiceover, you bought what you're used to. And I used that for many years. And then as I kept going, I remembered that Sennheiser was one of the fine microphone manufacturers. Now, that doesn't mean if somebody hung an AKG 414 BULS in front of me or hung a Neumann in front of me, I would have any problem. You're still going to step up and do the job and let the engineer do the rest on the back. That was the early day. Now we've moved to home studios, so we all have to pay attention to all this stuff. But I got paid for every voiceover, including the ones I did on Shure SM58s in the tape room of the local TV station.
Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, Chad Lafarge's 12 days of office hours, Christmas 1, answered yes to 12, 7, 6, 4, and 1, no to the rest. What's yeses and nos do you have? See beginning of the chat today.
I don't know if I have them all in front of me. We'd have to probably think about that a little bit more. Next question.
Harshid Trivedi in Daytona Beach, Florida is back. What conventions are we coming up to or coming up in Orlando, Florida?
Harshid, are there specific ones that are coming up that you're paying a lot of attention to?
Yesterday, sorry, I didn't raise my hand on this one, but yesterday, Guy and some of the other folks mentioned this during the pre-show, that there's stuff coming up next year. I don't know if it's Infocom or one of the others, and they mentioned Orlando and where to stay. So,
yeah, the best way the way I figure out when things are coming is like you go right to the convention site. Usually the convention center will have a list of all the things that are scheduled in the convention center for the next year. And you can just figure out all the things that are there rather than trying to dig around and try to figure it out. We used to do this all the time with Moscone because then we would find out the main thing that we had to figure out is when they were doing the fancy food convention, because the fancy food convention, I don't know what it's like post-COVID, but pre-COVID, there's a lot of good food. Like so you figure out so you had to then figure out when it was, and then you had to find out who you knew that was a restaurant. I went in as a sous chef, which I'm not capable of being, but I went in as a sous chef, and then there's lots of things to taste, anyway, it was good. Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Wurzburg, Germany is back for, just lost a question. I'll just pick this one up. Harshid Trivedi, Daytona Beach, asking, to those audiobooks like Wall Street Journal or others, what is your understanding of these types of audiobooks? Do you gain similar knowledge from it?
Yeah, I don't, are you talking about magazines that go audio-wise, Harshid? Is that the question is? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Harshid.
so more so that so it gives you numbers and statistics and figures, right? So I'm more curious of, I understand audiobooks or audio a little bit differently because now my brain is attuned to this faster movement. And when you are reading something like Wall Street Journal or some other magazines and such, how does that convert to you gaining the same knowledge as you would pick up a magazine or a book that had that same information?
I find that I think for me, I find that I learn a lot more because I listen to so much more than I would ever read. So I listen to, I listen to lots and lots of articles. I probably wouldn't read them if they were in magazines. And that's, for me, I think that I find that to be the case. Like with foreign affairs is a good example of it. I've been reading that on and off since I was like 12. So, but I now read pretty much I listen to every one that shows up in their audio feed. I do try to open up their reading it on my phone is really painful, so I don't read any of the articles that they put out that aren't in audio format. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm a little sad because I do think that some of the things in my youth, one of the great pieces of advice I got from the first program director who helped me, I named Nat Stevens at KOY in Phoenix. He told me, just do a lot of audio reading whenever you can. And so I was looking around and there was a service in Phoenix, the Talking Book Library and also Sun Sounds, and both of them did radio reading for people who are print impaired. And it was a fabulous, I went in 3 times a week for probably 15 years and got involved with all the people who did that kind of work. And one of the things that was most magical about it is they tried to do a complete survey of everything. They did the daily newspaper. They did magazines like Time and Newsweek and things like that. They had shows on the grocery coupons. So you were facing a different kind of reading literally every time you went in. And that gave you a broad look at helping an audience understand stuff. Also, there was a radio reading service that did textbooks for college people. And boy, that was an amazing experience, going in and describing geometry figures, as you'd gotten a request from a medium geometry book from a student who was going to go through college and you wanted to help them do that. I know there are a lot of automated reading services that can turn text into speech, but I'm sad that this generation coming up who are going to be doing voice work don't get those kind of experiences like I had early in my career. It opened my brain up so much to learning how to describe things for other people.
Yeah, I think that the hard part is that I'm getting, as I said earlier, I am getting to the point where I prefer a computer to read it to me than a human, because I can read it faster. I can pull it in faster. And I think that my frustration is also that a good example is, again, to go back to Foreign Affairs or The Economist. The Economist does all the articles in audio, but Foreign Affairs picks and chooses and is really late and everything else. And as a user, I really want them just to put all of them on. Like when they release the magazine, I just want if they want to go back and read them with a person later, that's fine. But I really want it in real time, and I feel like I'm not getting that. And at the same time, again, I can process it better than at speed. And so, but I think that AI is going to be a real challenge, because there's a lot of, like we were talking about it. Well, like it writes computer code, but the computer code isn't perfect. You need to be an advanced coder. And the question we had is, how do you become an advanced coder if it's doing all the basic code? If it does all the basic coding and you're just correcting it, at some point you're going to age out everybody that actually knows how to code, and then you have to depend on the machine to do it all, and then we end up with eventually it'll become self-aware. Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany, asking, for the next step in office hours broadcast studio lighting, do you recommend a 1x1 flat LED over a point source with a big diffuser, or the other way around?
Good, Mitchell.
Well, the general rule of thumb would be a sufficient light source into a large diffuser. I have a Chimera here, but the problem is in my studio, I don't want this giant Chimera hanging over my desk here. So I've gone with a 1x1 from Light Panels. It's a Astra Soft. Mm-hmm. And at this close, at this distance, it seems to work okay for me.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Oh, I thought you said Mitchell.
I'm sorry, Bill. Sorry.
Yeah. It just depends on the circumstance. And it also depends on you. Those of us who have been around for many, many years are a little sensitive to the fact that our faces are getting more wrinkly and they have blemishes and things like that we didn't have when we were fresh-faced young kids. So larger light sources tend to be more flattering for aged skin. And that's just because the angle of incidence on a big softbox, the rays of light, the photons hit your face from many angles, and that diminishes the look of wrinkles and things like that. Point sources, though, can be just as good depending on how old and how the kind of look you're going for. But yeah, those are generally good rules. The bigger the light, the better. As if you have more problems, you need to work around.
Yeah, I have the one that I'm under right now is this is 5 feet wide. I guess almost 2 meters and 1 meter deep. And then there are 3 68 Bs from Nanlite behind it that are kind of, so it's one big soft light. If you can get big soft lights, they're really they're great. It's just a matter of whether you can put them in your office. My office is a single use office. That's all I use is what we're doing here. Go ahead, Mitchell.
If I had a nationally syndicated show like Mac Break Weekly, I probably would put the big one up there, but I'm just on the small one.
You're on an internationally syndicated show called Office Hours. You could, I'm just telling you. Next question.
Next question. Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, Guy Cochran is in Southern Cal and Bill's neck of the woods. Any tips of surfing?
Yeah, go.
You do not want surfing tips from me. Yeah. That would be deadly dangerous. It's always good to have Guy here, and we managed last time to get together for lunch, and I'm looking forward to trying to do the same thing here. It's just so nice to have this global community of people that we've gotten to know. And so when you find yourself in a different city or somebody comes to visit in your city, to be able to sit across the table and actually spend an hour with somebody is just a true joy. And it's one of the best offshoots of this thing that Alex started. So thank you, Alex.
Next question.
Next question, possibly our last one for Ronnie Hofse in Tromsø, Norway. BirdDog just released OG4 Open Gear NDI card. How many users Open Gear racks in their daily use?
We've used them a lot in the past. I mean, Open Gear is really great because you can have one rack and you have lots of different things that it's doing, and you don't have to worry about a lot of the power and a lot of other bits and pieces there. And so the Open Rack has been pretty effective for some of the stuff that we've done. And so I don't think we have any in the pipeline right now, but in the past we've definitely heavily used Open Racks because we can put a lot of converters in and so on and so forth. So it's been very effective. All right. Well, we 2 hours of Q&A. We started getting relatively close to our record. We didn't quite make it. 67 being the record of number of questions. Not that we're trying to get that record, but I always find it funny when we start getting close. Anyway, so a lot of great questions today. Thanks so much for passing them in to us today. And it's great to have the be kind of back to the normal of what we're doing here. So we had a great show yesterday, and now we're back into it. We're in number 1 of our next 1,000. So and by the way, just great work for everybody on the other end to put all that work into yesterday. I know that was a big lift. But thanks to the producers for yesterday and today. Thanks to the panelists, of course. Can't do this without you. It's good to have all of you here. And thanks to the great team on the back end, putting this all together every single day. The little village that wakes up every morning or afternoon or evening and kind of comes together and makes the donuts. If you're not from the East Coast, you won't know what I just said. But anyway, it's okay. Anyway, we'll talk to you in after hours. Time to make the donuts. I don't even remember who did that, but I remember a guy getting up like, I got to make the donuts. Got to make the donuts. Oh, Dunkin' Donuts. Of course, it was an ad from 1980. The Tlaloc Traversal, 116,000 miles, 187,000 kilometers, 1 billion bananas. We covered 1 billion bananas for scale. 1 billion. 1 billion.